Okay, let's take a look at Rysol, and yes, that's how you say her name. I can prove it.
And walk the path of righteousness together.
Holy Matron Rysol! Holy Matron Rysol! Holy Matron Rysol!
But I couldn't actually find her on a friends list. I tried to look through the companion units. I looked for a while and to no avail. So I do have some footage that I recorded just to have some stock footage, and we can see that she attacks immediately. She's an attacker AI, and after that we'll see what she decides to do next. But she really has two buffs, a team buff and then a solo buff on her main kit that she might actually use. So what we'll see when she goes here is, yep, so that's her team buff. It gives an HP absorption. She can dispel re-raise with it, and then she's going to go ahead and go attack. So really what you would expect here, she would have to use her team buff before she uses her single target buff, which gives her protect and shell and AP consumption down. They're good buffs, but otherwise if you wanted to use her sub jobs, there's some okay buffs there. I mean, store will give you a big attack boost and defense penetration for one turn. It's kind of tricky to use. Really, I think you're going to be using her main kit buffs and then possibly a TMR buff as well. So I don't think AP is going to be a concern for her either, because she has access to AP consumption down, initial starting AP, and some other things as well to gain back her AP. All right, so we could talk about Rysol's stats quickly just because they're pretty interesting in that she's kind of a bruiser. She's got a good HP. She has some AoE resistance. She has access to things like protect and shell, some decent resistances, although not across the entire board here. But she also has a really good attack stat. She has very, very high accuracy. She's pretty fast. She's got the mobility and everything. So there's a lot of cool things going on here, but we're going to find out that that doesn't equate to her being the best attacker in the world, although she certainly can do some damage against the right target. But overall, a worthy stat sheet for a 100 cost unit. We'll talk about her pros next, and we'll start with the damage. So what I was kind of alluding to is that she's got the 40% innate defense penetration, which is pretty standard these days, but then there's another 40% she can access from store, but it's a one-turn buff, so it's pretty unreliable to use, especially once you're already engaged in a melee. But she doesn't have any innate slash resistant penetration. There's none on her kit. She does have a slash in peril, so against those low slash resist targets, she can actually do quite a bit of damage, but otherwise she does get a little bit hamstrung there. She also has some strike and pierce damage, which are often resistances we don't have built, so she has some ways around that. But she also has a barrier break. She's got a good attack stat, as we said, but also a 40% buff. And then I listed it under this section because I think it is relevant. She has that select 2 attack. It's single target attacks, but you can choose 2 targets, and I think that's important to list under damage because it can go against unit attack resistance, which is less common, I think, than AoE resistance on units, which can make her deal more damage when you kind of just see her out in the wild. Let's talk about her survivability next, because as I mentioned, she is a bit of a bruiser, and that comes from a few areas. One of the main ones is being able to put protect and shell on herself, but she also has 30% HP absorption on one of her skills, but then can grant that to her allies and herself for all of her skills. She also decreases her opponent's defense penetration by 30% on her LB, and she has a one-time physical barrier, but it's on an attack. Now that attack also breaks barriers, so you can kind of think about it like a barrier steal. She also has 20% slash resist, 15% missile, 10% magic, and 10% AoE. So those are all pretty solid resistances to be starting off with. Next, we'll talk utility, and there's quite a bit that she has on her kit. We can start with the mobility, so 2 jump innately, and then she can have that +1 move jump passive, healing power down, which is so important. I'm playing a lot of Fire Arena this week, and when King Mont gets healing power down, his self heal is so much worse. It's a really big deal if you can have it on a kit. She also gives her allies the HP absorption. She has a TP skill that lets all of her skills remove re-raise, very, very handy, and then a full dispel as well. She's got 100% hits on both sub jobs, 1 small damage and then 1 large damage. Different attack types, very good to see. You can't have both on though. And then really good AP management. So we're talking AP consumption down. We're talking that she has 15 initial starting AP when you do her Transcension, but also she has a skill that when you kill somebody, you do gain back AP. So she is going to be pretty decent at gaining a lot of AP and then not spending it too quickly and then getting some back. And I think that's all really good to see, considering that, you might want to stick bells on a different unit. So as always, we're going to mention a few cons, but before that, you made it this far in the video. Good for you. I'm honestly, I'm proud of you for that. So if you don't mind, here's the call to action. Subscribe to the channel. I can't even pronounce it. Like the video. It helps out. Thank you very much. Okay. So the cons, we've got, a low range unit, which can be a deal breaker on certain maps. She's got okay mobility, or decent mobility. She has that limited slash resist penetration that we talked about. She has the weakness to pierce and strike, which I kind of put here because a lot of units are just getting like good to they're getting decent resistances across the board except for maybe strike. So to have a weakness to pierce is kind of a bummer, and then no defense or spirit. So that is, I think, a big deal. I know not everybody does, but I think that is a pretty big deal considering she is supposed to be a bruiser. So what are you going to do about that? The other thing that people might say is a con, and I don't usually list as this because I don't. This is something that this video should be able, you can watch it down the road and it's still going to be relevant. So I'm not going to list the schedule as a con on paper, but it is for a lot of people going to be a con for them that there is the Full Metal Alchemist collab coming up and you want to save your Visior for that. And she is a unit that will return in, time and time again with the Fest banners for the Crystal, the Warriors of the Crystal. We can also compare her to Glaciela Flag Bearer, and I did not put a third comparison because I wanted to get this video out. I am sorry, but we can see that they are, both 100 cost wind units, both very accurate. Rysol coming in a little bit more accurate than Glaciela. Glaciela has a lot more crit chance potential. She's got the 80% innate defense penetration, which can very easily go to 90 or 100, whatever is your preference. So really, we can see that Glaciela is going to be just a much better DPS unit, and she's got so much utility on her own kit for dealing with people that I can see why people would be like, I don't need Rysol because I already have Glaciela and I can already fit her in with Droom and Sadly, and that's going to be just fine for me. But there's actually a world where these two work very well together because they both bring so much utility and that they both have a bit of survivability, especially when you add on the fact that with Rysol in the party, they can both start recovering HP for the damage that they do. So if you can imagine Glaciela Flagbearer, taking a hit, going in, swinging, and healing back up, that is actually a very, very appetizing combination. So I think there is a very viable team with these two units, but a lot of people are going to feel that they don't need both of them, and if they already have Glaciela, then they're in a pretty good spot. Some other little things we can talk about. Her TMR is pretty great. It's an accessory with agility. You love to see it. Really good for new players to pick up. And the ability to casts, always good. Again, that's because of guild battle. We want to be able to cast this in both fights if it's impactful. And it is, because it's a single target buff that gives you 25% agility and 15% AoE resistance. This is a very powerful effect that a lot of units might want to use. And especially if a new player were to pick up this TMR, it would be a staple for them for a very long time to come. We can also look at the weapon that we're going to be able to farm, which is the Holy Dark Blade. And this is a dagger that has some pretty interesting effects because it gives even more AP consumption down for Rysol, and then some more AoE resistance, as well as that slash pen that she doesn't have. Now, this will put her at 20% slash pen. You don't get any more from Trust Stones because they don't stack. It's still pretty low, but it's something. So this is probably going to be her best in slot weapon, just to make sure that she does a little bit more damage against those people with stack slash resistance. And you can see that we can build several versions of it. I think for her, you're probably going to be building just the assault version because you don't really need this accuracy, although it gives you a bit of crit rate too. The accuracy, if you're going to do it, you're just going to go ham, I think, and she already has so much accuracy. If you put an Alex ring on her, if you put something else, she's going to be just fine hitting some of these evade units that are going to be prevalent, if you don't know yet, for the next few weeks. And you might be wondering, do I need to transcend Rysol? And the answer is yes. Yes, you do, because she gets 15 initial AP. It's one of the best effects out there. She gets 15 more accuracy. That's a big deal. And it also upgrades her job level 25 skill, which adds the barrier break onto it, and that is an essential skill to have. Absolutely need to do this 140. You don't have to reincarnate her, but you do need to spend some antlers on her to get those initial effects from going to level 140. And now if we're asking who Rysol is going to be strong against, it's definitely going to be against these evasion teams. The fact that she can hit with such high accuracy is going to be a big deal. The fact that she will be able to sustain potentially against a lot of them is a very big deal. And I also think she's going to be strong against any sort of team that you bring her that the opposing team doesn't have a lot of DPS. So I'm talking about teams with tanks and support units and then that big carry DPS. If that carry isn't taking out your team in one shot, you will have the chance to out sustain them because you can bring more DPS. If you bring her and Glaciela and then maybe Sadly as well, then maybe that's going to be bulky enough to take on some teams. And I think that you can definitely target quite a few teams that bring those, you know, non-damaging units and can't damage you so much that your absorption can't actually sustain your team. She, of course, will be weak to certain teams as well. She's going to be weak to like teams with barrier breaks will probably get through her pretty quickly, and especially if they have protect or shell remove. Pierce teams, strike teams, we're not going to see a ton of Pierce teams, but we do see a lot of people with Pierce subs, including Rysol, but we're also seeing Hio has it, so does Yuffie, so does Sorrow, so there's a ton of Pierce attacks out there, and I'm probably missing some as well. But we can also think about that strike teams are definitely going to be prevalent. But again, that's not really fair to say that she's weak to strike teams because almost everybody has a weakness to strike, so it's not really her deal, it's everybody's deal. So coming to the end of this video, we have to decide whether or not you should be pulling for her, and I think that you probably shouldn't be pulling for her. I mean, it's a 100 cost unit. They're, you know, hard to get. You can get her later because she does come back. If you're a brand new player that wants to get into Wind, I think you do pick up this unit because you're thinking to yourself, well, I just got Tifa for free. I'm going to get Rysol, I'm going to get Ed, and I'm going to build a Wind team. I really like Wind as an element. That's a scenario where you might do it. If you're a diehard Wind player, you might do it. And if you're somebody that's going to get into Dagger teams, so you've got like Resnick the Hoppy, and you know, I'm sure there's another Dagger unit in the game, and you put them all together, maybe those are some scenarios where you do pull for her. But otherwise, I think we're saving for Full Metal Alchemist. I think we're saving for limited units in general, and you know, all these spicy VCs that are coming up. So it's very hard to kind of justify getting a unit like this, especially, you know, if you're thinking again that your Wind team is already really set. Like, who do you take out if you run Joom, Sadly, and Glaciela? Who do you take out? Or if you run the, you know, like Sadly, Glaciela, and Sorrow or Yuffie as like a fire, you know, like an ice trap. I don't know, like, who do you take out to put in Rysol? I really don't know. And while there's probably going to be some really fun teams with her, maybe the fact that even though I sat there on my JP account hitting the update button, refreshing the companion list for like about 10 minutes, couldn't find a single Rysol, maybe that's saying something. But otherwise, you know, you don't really get bad units in this game for the most part. I mean, there are some, but so she's not a bad unit, but I still just don't recommend that most people pull for her. Again, if you know who you are, you know you like her, you might be pulling for her. Otherwise, I think you're going to be skipping. Okay, that's it. That's all. Thank you for watching. I hope it was useful. If it was, you can let me know in the comments, because that is what gives me power. I transcend when I have comments, so I appreciate them in advance, and I'll see you all in the next video.